Hello, it's Joanie McMahon here today. Welcome to video number 20 of 90. And I've titled today's video, Fear Sucks the Love Out of You. And I want to explain this because the truth of it is we are vibrational beings, and love is at the top of our, is who we really are. And fear is right down at the bottom of who we really are. It is not at all our true source, and that's why it feels so awful. I'm going to give you a couple of examples from my own life when I felt the fear so strongly that I had enough insight to work my way back into love. Now, the first time I can remember this was I think around 22, and I was in Toronto, Canada. I was working there as a cocktail waitress, and the games for disabled people were in Toronto that summer. And I thought that would be a cool thing to go and see, and so I headed out to the games one morning. I think probably the second day of the games. And I had never really seen disabled people before. I had grown up in a small town in Alberta, Canada, and really, my view on the world was quite limited. It was a very small town, primarily white people, and mostly abled people. I don't even remember seeing a disabled person. So here I am in Toronto at the summer games for the disabled, and I saw people with, no arms and no legs playing ping pong, holding the racket with their mouths. I saw people do the most amazing things, but at first, all I saw were the disabilities. All I saw were people who were less than in my eyes. And I had a fear strike me within that just felt terrible. I knew that it was irrational. I knew that it was, not that there was something wrong with how I was seeing this, but I couldn't help the feeling of this fear and this almost disbelief that people lived like this, that some people, that was their life. And that's all I saw the first time I went, was just, and I think I stayed maybe a couple of hours, and I ended up going into the washroom, and I literally vomited at the sight of all these people who were disabled. And I went home, and this fear just was sucking the love out of me. I just, it was something I had not experienced before in my recollection. And I knew that I needed to get out of this state. So I literally forced myself to go back to the games the next day and to just be there and to somehow work through this fear, to somehow look at this differently. And by the end of the second time I went, I literally was looking at this a completely different way, but it took an enormous amount of effort on my part to see it differently. I all of a sudden started to see all of the amazing relationships at the games. People, I no longer began to see people who were disabled. I just began to see people enjoying each other. The camaraderie between the athletes, the athletes speaking to each other and just having such a great time. I saw people with extraordinary limitations, as I would see it, doing amazing things. Imagine playing ping pong, holding the racket with your mouth. I mean, that's amazing. And all kinds of other things, So by the end of that day, I had literally moved from fear back into love. And I was completely in appreciation the for the games, for the fact that my country was open to bringing the invisible into the visible. I mean, how come I hadn't in 22 years seen disabled people? It was ridiculous. And I think really that was the beginning of the movement in my country to begin to find ways to integrate disabled people into our culture. Making it possible for people in wheelchairs to, you know, to get outside, so making the sidewalks lower and all kinds of, having handicap parking, having all kinds of innovative thinking that would allow the people who really were invisible because they weren't able to get around outside to come and into the visible and join our culture, to join people outside. So that's the first example. And honestly, it was a stretch for me to move. I could have easily stayed home after the first day and just had that memory of how terrible it was. But I just had to change that because I knew that it wasn't normal to feel this way, and that love really was not present in that kind of thinking. And so the second story I just want to share today is when I first heard about gay people. I had been raised as I mentioned, in a small town in northern Alberta, Canada, and really the only experience I had with couples were heterosexual. It never even occurred to me that there was anything but that. And I read a book, I can't even remember by who it was, a woman in California, and she was talking about the gay movement. And most of us know that the visibility of gay people has really stemmed a lot from California. People just moving into their own power and becoming open about who they really were. Anyway, I was reading her book, and she was talking about gay people. And honestly, I could feel that fear again. Again, I had this sickening feeling about it. It just felt so terrible. It didn't feel right, And yet I knew there was something wrong with that thinking because I had that fear stuck in my belly. And the more I read the book and the more I listened to this person and really allowed her to say what she wanted to say as a gay person, the more I began to hear her. I began to understand her. I began to realize that there were people that literally were born being attracted to the same sex. And I began to see it as okay. I began to integrate it as a wonderful thing in my in my thought process, in my thinking process. I began to see it as a possibility for humans, and before that it never even occurred to me. And and since then I have, completely eliminated all that fear. It doesn't, in fact, I have many friends who are gay now, and my children were raised with, people who are gay in their lives. And again, it was moving my thoughts, knowing that the fear was not who I really was, and knowing that there was something wrong with how I was seeing this, and moving back into love, literally. And it took some time, it didn't happen. The fear was so strong that the change happened in about a day or so after I read the book. And I began to think, wow, that's pretty cool that, that this is something that's out there, that this is something that's part of who we really are as humans. And so today, the message really is that when you are feeling that fear, and I would say probably most people, by the time they're 20 have felt fear at some point or other, that when you have that feeling, it really means that you're looking at things in a way that the source within you would never look at it. And that's why it feels so bad. You know, it's a message that somehow the way you're looking at this is off. And you need to move your thinking into a place that moves you back into love. So those are two stories. And, you may, as you're listening to this, think of of your own story. Maybe a story where you haven't moved back into love. And, if that's the case, I want you to find a way to go back into that story and literally massage the thinking into a story that can help you soothe yourself back into love. And when you do that, you literally will feel transformed within. You will have a recognition that you have done something remarkable, because it is remarkable. When you move from fear into love, that's a huge vibrational leap. Literally, it's a massive leap, because so many of us stay in fear. So many of us don't even recognize that we're in fear sometimes. But the reason how you can recognize fear is that it feels terrible. It absolutely feels terrible. So we want to get good at recognizing those feelings of it not feeling great, and finding a way to move that thinking back into love. All right, I hope this has been helpful to you. I woke up this morning thinking about those two incidences and how they literally helped me without any help from, that I actually did that work without knowing what I know today about fear. And you can too. You literally can do that. And you may even have stories of how you've moved from fear into love. And you know what? Why don't you make a video about that and share it with the world? Because there's so many people that need to hear this, that have fear that needs to be shifted. All right, Joanie McMahon signing out. And please, would you join me on my fan page and like it? And I'm putting all kinds of great stuff on there at facebook.com/growwithjoanie. Signing out. Take care. Bye for now.